over here in London in the UK. That's where we're coming to you today. This webinar today is private clouds, the benefits for AEC. And really briefly, if we start with some very basic housekeeping, I'm sure you're all familiar with the systems these days. There's a chat box down in the corner. All of the attendees will actually be on mute, so it'll only be me speaking. What we'll do, if you've got any questions as we're going along, there will be a Q&A session at the end, but if you've got anything specific as you're going along, if you pop that in the chat box, I'll try and respond to those as I go. Now, really briefly, as I said, my name is Chris Harvey. I'm the Operations Director at IMSCAD. Today, private clouds benefits for AEC is our subject matter. I'm going to give you a brief introduction as to who we are. We're going to talk about clouds and basically explain the different types of clouds and what we mean by private clouds. We're going to talk about virtualization. I'm going to give you a brief update on the latest sort of progress with virtualization as regards technology, licensing in respect of Autodesk products, and the support, and equally what you can expect from performance in a virtual environment these days. I'm going to touch upon AEC and the specifics of AEC, developments there about integration of styles and collaboration. We'll talk briefly about BIM. I'm not going to get into too much detail on BIM for obvious reasons. There's a lot. We could spend the whole webinar talking about BIM, and I'm sure you've all been on numerous ones along the way. And then we're going to get on to virtualization, private clouds, and why they're a perfect solution to meet the demands of BIM. So that's going to be our format today. As I say, if you've got any things you want to bring up or mention along the way, just pop them in the chat box, and I'll endeavour to respond to those. Good. So if we get underway, IMSCAD, why are you listening to us today? Who are we? Well, basically, we're a virtualization company based in London. We've got 2 data centres in London, 2 in New York, 1 in Zurich. We were an Autodesk reseller, originally invited by Autodesk to get involved with the Map 3D product. Obviously, with our virtualization skills, that's why they brought us in. It was the first product they needed deployed in a virtual environment. I'll be perfectly honest, I don't think we were very good as a reseller. We realized our limitations in that respect, but had by then engaged with Autodesk in assisting them in getting more of their products ready for the Citrix virtualization environment. So we helped Autodesk with the development of AutoCAD and Revit, both ranges of products. We did some international pilots, key sites with different environments, test the performance and understand the key areas and what was necessary to get these resource-hungry applications working in a virtual platform. In 2012, well, we saw the 2012 releases of the Citrix Ready products from Autodesk, at which point we resigned our position as a reseller. As I say, we were never very good at it anyway, to be perfectly frank. But we then set about supporting all Autodesk partners and end users and working with Autodesk directly in taking their virtualization-ready applications to the marketplace. And that's where we sit. So we've spent a number of years doing this. We've moved on since then to provide the testing services, the certification for the Autodesk suites. We do testing for NVIDIA, who obviously make the GPU cards that are so important. We've done a lot of testing with them in relation to their new grid products, the grid GPU cards. And we also do testing on behalf of some of the hardware manufacturers. We've recently done some stuff with Dell to certify their servers to work. And we're working very closely with Hewlett-Packard. The key thing I think to note of this is these are not like office-based applications where you can expect to plug them in and away you go. Unfortunately, with CAD and graphic-based stuff, it doesn't work like that. And to get it into a scalable environment is a little bit different. That's what we do. We sit in that middle ground between application specialists. I'm sure all of you have got Autodesk reseller or channel partners who assist you on the application side. We work closely with a number of those globally. And we sit between them and the Citrix guys, who obviously have the skills at the application, at the platform level, but not the skills at the application level. So we really sit in that unique bit, sitting between the two, and provide specialist services to both install and support CAD users running in virtual environments, and that, of course, is on a global basis. We have to date done more deployments and support more users than anybody else. We really are the global specialists in that area. So that's why you're talking to me. We do come at this from a point of knowledge. So I'm going to start really by talking to you about cloud. So we talk about why are private clouds relevant to the AEC community. Well, let's just distinguish what we mean by these different types of clouds, because there's a lot of information discussed in the media, in the various luminaries in the industry, and they all come up with slightly different things. We get some very conflicting information from many of the software vendors. The way we see it and how we distinguish the different types of cloud, personal clouds are where we start. Personal clouds are in relation to the people. They empower and enable them to work and collaborate from any location at any time and on any device. Now, these are not owned by IT. The personal clouds represent the devices, the applications, the data, the contacts, and the locations that are unique to the individual. The key role we see for IT is to make these this unique personal cloud, the personal assets, available anywhere at any time on any device. So the core, and what we would be concentrating on today, is private clouds. Now, private clouds cover the broad mix of applications of data, and indeed those users and their personal clouds, which are necessary for any organisation to function both effectively and securely. Now, they're critical in allowing IT to centralise and manage applications and desktops, and then deliver them as an on-demand service to any device, but at the same time maintaining the high levels of security and control that are demanded by the organisation. Now, further to that, of course, we have the public clouds. Now, from our perspective, these offer organisations additional functionality or service options which are outside their own infrastructure, outside the control of their IT department. But these provide them with infinite possibilities and expandability as an on-demand service. Principally, due to the licensing restrictions, deployments of CAD applications are normally based on private clouds. For the organisational side of it, obviously the personal clouds are covered for the individuals, but equally within that, it's not uncommon for us to include in those deployments some additional elements which we'll touch upon the public cloud, and we'll see that in cloud rendering services or mail services, Microsoft 365. So what we normally talk about there is a reference to a hybrid cloud scenario in terms of the ultimate deployment. But what we're really talking about here is private clouds where the IT keeps full control of both the applications, all of the assets of the organisation. There is clearly a reluctance still with enterprise-based clients to move significant amount of asset and data into public cloud spaces. I think there's still a relevant fear, and I think it's an understandable fear at this stage. So that's why we're particularly focusing today on private clouds, and that will be what we're referring to. Now, I said I'd give you a brief overview of virtualization and where we are at the moment. Now, there's been significant developments in virtualization technologies, both in terms of hardware, with the expansion options available in servers. We're seeing certainly developments, Hewlett-Packard particularly, with improvement in blade servers and the expansion options you've got available there. Equally with the GPUs, NVIDIA have been at the forefront of this technology for some time. We have seen vast leaps forward from them in terms of the CUDA cores available at GPU level and the processing powers that they have. As I say, we've been doing some testing with them with their new grid technology. A lot of their cards now are developed in what are termed a passively cooled card, so we've had to see amendments in the hardware from the manufacturers in terms of supplying servers that can support these passively cooled cards. We are going to see some movements from NVIDIA in the future, I can assure you, which will include some of these back into actively cooled cards. That will mean the number of servers we've got available that we can use these new sort of super GPUs is going to improve. But we're seeing developments from the hardware manufacturers in that. Now, this is a constantly moving situation. We're seeing stuff you may have seen stuff from NVIDIA about the new VCA technology that they're launching into the marketplace. We're working with them quite closely on that. There are developments coming from NVIDIA and Citrix in terms of the VGX hypervisor, which will again change the nature of the deployments that we're able to do and what virtualization means to companies adopting it. There is a mix of virtualization technologies. In essence, VMware have stepped up a little bit further. We now have them as an option at hypervisor level, so for server virtualization. Citrix offer their own version, Zen Server, which is a good and certainly cost-effective product. But when we're talking about application and desktop virtualization, we really need to focus on Citrix. They are the market leader, they're the best, and there's a reason for that. They have a much better product than anybody else. And it's no surprise that support given from Autodesk on their design and CAD products is based around support for Citrix in terms of virtualization. So we're talking there, Citrix Zen Desktop is effectively a suite of products which includes Zen App, which we have to use for the CAD virtualization of applications. The reason for that is effectively so that we can achieve scalability and get multi-users onto that platform. There are some developments, as I mentioned, with the VGX hypervisor. We'll see more benefits there, which will allow us to increase the number of users we can do on a desktop virtualization basis. But at this stage, we haven't had the full testing of the VGX hypervisor. We don't know how scalable that technology will prove to be. There are clearly some benefits, but we'll have to weigh that one up when we get to it. At this stage, virtualization for CAD applications is done with Zen App, even if we then publish it through a desktop virtualization tool like Zen Desktop. So that's just a brief overview. Now, I mentioned Autodesk in there, and I think it's necessary for us to talk about Autodesk because there's been some changes which also apply to virtualization. Autodesk have significantly changed their licenses this year. That significant change means that we no longer have to dedicate licenses to a virtualization platform. We can have the standard network licenses that you have under subscription. Any product that can be network licensed, we can now put into a virtual platform. So that's a huge step forward for Autodesk, who traditionally have been rather tied up with their licensing and how we can take that forward, and have confused the issue by only licensing certain products and not licensing other products. Well, that's all gone. We've now got open game on their licensing, which means we can run licenses from the same license manager for the network users and indeed for mobile Citrix users. So it's making it easier for companies to look at these options and test them out perhaps for their mobile users. We certainly have one significant deployment at the moment, which is in, I believe it covers 10 different offices. We're looking there at just supplying the mobile users of this particular firm, which is their sort of first foray into the virtualization market, but we're starting with them with their remote users, the ones who need mobility. What we will be doing with them next year is moving that through to the rest of their design group users, and we'll be upping the numbers significantly. But at this stage, it makes it easy because we can use the same licenses for both sets of users and take them from the same central license pool. So that's ideal and a huge move forward. The other thing I've noted here from Autodesk is the suites. We have done testing for them on the suites, and we are seeing now not only the allowance under license that we can put these products into a virtual environment, but we're also seeing support confirmed direct from Autodesk for the suites. Now, the ones that they are confirming support for, I've listed them on the screen there. It's the design suite, the AutoCAD design suite rather, building design suite, which I think is the key one for the AEC market, infrastructure design suite, which will obviously touch upon people more on the civil-based side, and the plant design suite. Now, the key point to note here, I think, is that while Autodesk are moving and are now confirming direct support for some of these suites, that support is for Citrix, not for open virtualization with any virtualization platform, but for Citrix. The relevant point to this is, I mean, for example, we've already done the testing on the product design suite. We've had no issues with that running on Citrix and indeed being scalable. I think the point we need to look at here is if IMSCAD are going to assist you, any of you out there, and help you with virtualization. What we will be doing is basically putting a support contract in place to support whatever applications we put into a virtual environment. And I think that's the key thing, that whether Autodesk are confirming and guaranteeing support for these products, in truth, if you went to Autodesk and asked them for support on the building design suite running on Citrix, I would suggest that you will probably end up speaking to us at IMSCAD, because that's pretty much what happens when people go to Autodesk, is they farm it out to us because we have the knowledge and we do the testing for them. So the key thing here is that we can put anything into a virtual environment, any products, and I think we have to look at the nature of deployments when we're going out there. It's very rare that people have got individual products. All deployments are a little bit different, but there's normally a mix of different applications, a mix of different add-ons, third-party plugins and the like. Most design users will also be using some Adobe products. We'll equally see, as I said, bits and pieces from other manufacturers. So it's important to know that you can get all of those products installed into a virtual environment, which is our skill and our specialisation, and equally that you can get support on them. And I think the only other key point to this that really is of relevance is that what we achieve now is to deliver workstation performance even over the WAN, and you're fully supported on that. So in a LAN environment on your local network and controlled in your corporate environment, performance is absolutely excellent, but even over the wide area network we can deliver workstation performance on 3D resource-hungry applications. So it's come on a long way. The developments in both the platform from Citrix and indeed the hardware make this now a very realistic option for this sector of the market. And we're talking AEC, we're talking about design users. We're not just talking about the office-based users. We're talking about the guys who are doing the heavy-duty design work, working with 3D apps. So that's really the move forward. Now, AEC, I'm going to briefly touch upon AEC. Obviously, architecture, engineering, construction, AEC consists of separate players who work together to bring projects to fruition. So basically, they're integrating these separate entities into a single industry, effectively, so that they can work more efficiently to achieve the common goals. So the AEC industry has now been sort of bundled together for some time. As a result of that, there's been tools developed to assist in that bringing together of those three distinctly different areas. So it's the integration between those three which are key, and underpinning that is, of course, the collaboration between the three. And what we're seeing more and more with the tools that we're seeing moving forward to assist the AEC industry, it was necessary to get practical applications that facilitate the technology, outsourcing and exchange of information within that industry. So to bring standardization to the three different industry sectors, a unified digital process was needed, and that's pretty much what became defined as building information modeling, which is what, of course, you're all faced with these days. So BIM, we're there. Now, I'm not going to spend too long in too much detail going on about BIM, because there's a lot of different levels and it affects a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. But in essence, let's touch upon the basics of it. Traditional building obviously was reliant upon two-dimensional drawings, plans, elevations, sections and the like. BIM extends this beyond the 3D, your primary spatial dimensions, width, height and depth. Fourth dimension, cost. Fifth dimension, obviously looking at time. So BIM is a process. It involves generation, management of digital representations of both the physical and the functional characteristics of a facility. So the resulting models become shared knowledge resource, and they support decision making about the facility from its earliest conceptual stages through the design, the construction, its operational life, and finally through to its eventual demolition. So BIM enables a single virtual information model to be generated and handed by the design team, whether that's architect, surveyor, civil, structural, MEP, handed through to the contractors, the subcontractors, then onto the owner and indeed the facility operator, with the same model being used throughout the entire facility or the buildings or facilities life cycle. So the way all of that comes together in essence. Each separate profession adds its unique discipline-specific data to the single shared model. The idea being it reduces information losses that traditionally occur when a new team takes ownership of the project, but it also facilitates collaboration between the varying teams working on the project, ultimately managing the impact of change on all the dependent products and collaborators. Now, to do this, the model is based in a combination of what we term objects, generic, product-specific, solid shapes, and indeed void spaces. They each carry their own geometry, attributes, and relations. And it's the objects' defined parameters and relations to the other objects that automatically determine, when one's amended, what impact it will have on the other dependent objects. So this dramatically affects the impact of any change on all collaborators, their services, products, and obviously as a result the basic work styles of those contributors. So ultimately this places huge demands on IT. They've now got to handle vast amounts of data and indeed store that data. There's greater processing required from the hardware, and we're seeing much more expensive and investment in workstations to achieve that. Certainly in Revit workstations, a much higher requirement than we were previously looking at in CAD workstations. There's a huge increase in the number of potential collaborators in these projects. So IT has the pressure of how to deploy them, how to manage them, how to manage their applications, how to manage those users, their access, those users of course being in distributed locations, including remote users. So IT has all of these demands placed on it in trying to support that raft of users. So it's all about access to the data, controlling the data, the version control, and of course with so many collaborators in so many different locations, security for the data and indeed IP protection. So there are huge costs from IT's side in terms of management of the users, management of the applications, management of the data. There's huge costs involved in the increased expenditure required on the hardware to support these applications and the levels of data. And of course, potentially, there's an increased cost involved in the licensing of those applications that these additional users will need. Some of the collaborating partners will, of course, have their own licensing and provide their own licensing for these purposes. But at times, if they're employed by the organisation may be obliged to provide them with licensing for that period of their employment. So again, there can be huge costs that are going to hit the IT department. But overall, there's a series of significant demands in effectively delivering BIM so that these guys can collaborate effectively and work on these projects in the manner that's now required. So what I'm going to do is really briefly talk about the benefits, the key benefits of virtualization. Now, this is a slide I've just grabbed from another presentation that we do. It's not to do with the presentation we were doing. It's just this is a basic slide that we do on the key benefits of virtualization. And I think if we look immediately at these benefits, you'll see how relevant they are to the specific demands of a BIM deployment that's now put on the IT managers. So first of all, we're looking at application management. Well, the centralizing of all the applications massively reduces IT management's costs. We have no more patches and upgrades. It's all done once centrally on the servers, then delivered to the desktops of the users, imaged out to them. So we're bringing in IT management to a single instance management in terms of the applications. Now, if we're looking at this, where we potentially could be looking at multiple offices, when I talk about collaboration, we're mentioning outside collaborating firms who would be collaborating on projects. We have numerous deployments where the collaboration is between regional offices of the same firms, and these are not just regional, we're talking cross-geo. So we're doing deployments at the moment where we've certainly got collaboration on one where we're collaborating from servers held in Germany to Ireland to people in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're likewise doing it from the States back the other way where we've got servers deployed in Seattle and we've got users on those from London. So we're seeing collaboration on a much greater scale than just sort of regionally or just within third-party collaborators. This can be intercompany as well. The second point here, key benefits of virtualization, the reduction in network traffic. Because, well, we potentially can see a reduction in the cost of lease lines. We're not moving large files around the network. all of the data stays centrally on the servers and is virtualized there, and the remote and all users come in and access it or view it there without the data actually moving. So we haven't got large files flying around the network. All that goes backwards and forwards in the Citrix deployment is the mouse movements, keystrokes, pixel changes. So we can massively reduce the amount of network traffic. This is ultimately how we are able to achieve such good performance levels even over the WAN. From that, of course, the centralized data staying on the servers, it significantly reduces the risks involved, security issues, conforms to client data compliance. We're basically getting away from the distributed data models that we saw in the past. It gets out of that sort of localized data mentality, and so it basically hugely improves security, never leaves the central server. It's only viewed from the remote devices. So if a remote device is accidentally misplaced or lost or indeed stolen, all that happens is simply access is then withdrawn from that device. There is no data on that device to compromise. So we're talking significant IP protection there. The next point on here is mobile working. Well, very straightforwardly, workers in different locations can work on the centrally stored data and work with the centrally managed and stored applications. Now this applies to regional offices, it applies to single offices in some cases, but certainly regional offices. But with the bring your own device policies we're seeing now, this also fits in with mobile working, with home working, hot desking requirements, and even with site work. The key to remember on this is that when we say bring your own device, it really is, with Citrix, it's device and operating system independent. So we have currently, we have architects who have deployed these solutions who are able to travel on site, meet with their collaborating partners, and actually work on iPads, pulling up Revit models, looking at those, even making amendments, and they can even do that on 3G. Obviously, coming in on the open internet, we can put in different security products which Citrix offer, like NetScaler Access Gateway, to control the security for those users. But even coming in on the open internet through ADSL or whichever means they choose, the performance is still good enough for these guys to work. Now, I wouldn't recommend sitting on site trying to do 8 hours work on an iPad on a Revit model. I'm sure you'll get fairly fed up by the end of it. But it's the fact that we can offer these facilities. Certainly if you're working on a laptop or something of that nature from a remote location, then the level of performance will be the same as you would achieve on your workstation. So that's a huge benefit and a huge move forward in terms of mobility. And this is what we're seeing as being the buy-in for many different people, as well as the collaboration requirements, this requirement for further mobility for their staff. I've talked here about enterprise mobility. We're basically talking about giving IT control. It becomes far easier for IT to manage users, to add, remove users, instantly scale the business to meet its changing needs. So we're really looking here at project requirements. To deploy 20, let's say you've got to deploy 20 Revit users and you've got to deploy them on workstations. I'm sure you're all blatantly aware of what a task that would be. For a Citrix deployment, basically someone in IT would simply need to set up those 20 users, their access, what they were allowed to see, what files, what applications they had access to. You can immediately ensure they're working on the correct versions of applications. They've got the right applications that they need to perform their duties, and they've got access to the correct data, or perhaps only the projects that they should have access to, not to all of the projects. So it's much easier for IT to control. That can be done. Frankly, they could be setting up users at 1 every 5 minutes without any problem, as opposed to if you were considering a workstation deployment and configuring and deploying those workstations individually. Let's say you were doing it over 1 or more sites. I'm sure you can imagine how long that would take. So there's huge savings in terms of IT management and the time they're going to spend managing the users. The other point on here is hardware costs. We don't visit many which are greenfield sites, so to speak, where we can say, okay, if you're doing a brand new deployment. We do see it for projects. We've scaled up one project recently for 165 users, which was just a project requirement. I think there's 165 concurrent users. I think we've got about 300 on there altogether. But normally what we're looking at is reducing hardware costs when we're talking of upgrading potentially from AutoCAD to Revit, where there's obviously Revit workstations are a significant investment. They have to have greater processing power to run these larger files and larger model sizes, and indeed the Revit application itself. So it's in those cases, because we bring everything into the central server, all of the processing is done at the central server, the endpoint device becomes of no consequence, you don't basically need to upgrade that endpoint device. You can sweat the asset you've got for a lot longer, wait until that asset fails potentially and replace it with a fairly low-cost thin client, or have people working on their own devices of choice that they bring into the office. So it really can save you a lot in terms of expenditure at that end. There is an initial cost going in. Obviously, you've got to buy service to support this, but in terms of return on investment, that money is soon coming back to you if you're looking at hardware refreshes every potentially 2 or 3 years on your existing hardware, upgrades that are needed to move to Revit, deployment for new users, things of that nature. So you're soon going to look at a fairly healthy return of investment there. So that, as I said, that's just one of our standard slides, the benefits of virtualization. So I thought I'd drop that in because it immediately will resonate with all of the points that we put in as the demands on IT from trying to deliver BIM to their users. So private clouds, why do they work for AEC specifically? Well, this is pretty much what we've just spoken about, but private clouds for AEC, we've spoken about the demands of BIM, what it places on IT. Under a private cloud deployment, we centralize the management of the apps and the data, which gives the full control to IT. They're then virtualized. We deploy them on demand to any user, anywhere, at any time, on any device. And we do it all securely with the data remaining at the server. So IT controls the users, ease of deployment, full access control, ensuring the correct versions of the correct apps are available to the correct users. The benefits of single instance management for all of their patches and upgrades of those applications. So the data is never leaving the server. We ensure security, eliminate issues with version control, IP protection. You know, there's things traditionally associated with having distributed data. There is only one version of the data, and that's essentially on the server. So we've got the flexibility, the ease of user deployment and amendments as projects develop with user groups moving off and on projects, the ability for IT to put users on, to change the access of existing users. And equally, because we're talking about this private cloud, we've got flexibility to extend that potentially into the public cloud offerings if there's extended requirements at any time. As I said, you know, we can look at offloading rendering services, bringing in additional Office 365, things of that nature, and indeed, you know, potentially other public cloud offerings such as additional storage or additional services that can be available. As I pointed out, there's really specific cost savings here in terms of IT management, the management of the applications, the management of those users are a huge cost to IT, and we massively simplify that by putting this in a private cloud, centralizing everything and giving full control to IT management. That carries on. Of course, we've got the potential cost savings that we're talking about with the hardware, replacement of existing workstations with thin clients when those workstations stop working in years to come rather than being refreshed under the standard terms that they would be. Additional to the costs, I think, of hardware, we should mention the cost of licensing. I'm not going to say that this is going to dramatically reduce your license costs, but when you bring your licenses into a central pool and they are used as an on-demand service by the users, your effective use of the licenses increases. And we found a lot of companies have been able to reduce their license expenditure from deploying Citrix purely because the licenses are there for use as and when they're needed. They don't just sit on workstations being unused for any significant amount of time. So that's one of the benefits of centrally pooled resources at the license. So they're the key benefits of why private clouds specifically for AEC. Well, I'm just going to give you an indication here, and I've put in a sort of bonus slide here just to give you some indication of what kind of costs we're talking about. Now, this is for a single server, which we would expect a single server to support 20 users. And when I'm talking 20 users here, we're talking building design suite. So I think we're more likely looking at the 10 applications than the 5 applications. I think we should be practical there. Now, the kind of servers we're talking about here, this is based, and these are approximate figures that I've done. But this is basically for a single server which would support 20 users running building design suite. This would be a Hewlett-Packard DL380P. I've chosen here quite a small footprint machine. That would be with a dual 8-core processors running at 2.9 gigahertz. We would put in there something in the order of 128 gig of RAM, possibly double that depending on the size of the models and files you were using. Some minimal hard disk, about 300 gigs. What we would do on the GPUs, and this may surprise a few people out there, to support 20 building design suite users, we would be looking at 2 NVIDIA Q4000 cards. Now these are the older Quadro cards, they're only 2 gig cards each, but because we're pooling resources into central servers, we can effectively deliver 20 users of 4 gigabytes at GPU. Now, we are moving more and more towards the new grid cards from NVIDIA, and obviously what I would say is every deployment we look at is different. We have to look at the different mix of applications and users, file sizes, model sizes, etc., locations and everything else, and that will determine what are the best servers for each solution. But I put this out there to give you some indication of what we're looking at cost. Now those figures on the screen actually include all of the Windows licensing, the Citrix licensing, and indeed the cost that we would charge for installation and support of those applications for 1 year. What I am going to do is just jump that one on, and I don't know if you saw that move, it did. That is the comparable figures based on a 3-year plan. So we're talking there hardware expenditure, we're talking about the licenses, the renewals of the licenses, extended support from us for a 3-year period. Now, if you look at that based on 10 applications, we are basically talking there at, if you worked it out per month per user, that would be $117. So while there is an initial expenditure involved here, I'm sure you know the cost of maintaining and supporting your workstations, and I'm sure you're blatantly aware that it's significantly higher than the figures we're looking at here. So yeah, to put that in perspective, per user per month on 5 applications, that would be $100. On 10 applications, that's $117. Now that is based, as I say, on taking this and spreading the cost over a 3-year period. But that's all licensing, Windows, Citrix, our installation charges, and indeed our support extended for a 3-year period. And I will reiterate, we do support all of the applications that we will load onto servers. So you get full support on everything, and we will give you workstation comparable performance even for your WAN users. We have a significant, you know, a really at times often better than workstation level of performance when deployed on the corporate network locally. So to summarise today, then, I've tried to keep this to a minimum. I've talked for, I think, about 40 minutes now, so apologies for that. Really, to summarise, we've given you a quick overview of clouds, what they're all about, what we're talking about there, what we mean by private clouds and how that fits in. I've given you a brief overview of virtualization, where we are with the technology, the fact we've seen this change from Autodesk, which is very significant, the levels of support you can expect from Autodesk, and indeed from us, which I think is more relevant, and the performance that you should expect. You know, we are now delivering this successfully. We've got numbers of deployments. We've got, you know, thousands of users out there that we're supporting who are very happy and getting excellent performance from these solutions. We talked briefly about AEC, the integration of disciplines, and how collaboration is becoming the key. I obviously touched upon BIM. That will mean many things to many people, but really the benefits of it, the overall benefits, which is all about collaboration, and equally the demands that places on IT. I've then hopefully indicated to you how virtualization and indeed private clouds offer a clear solution to those demands that are placed on IT, and a very viable solution. And hopefully by showing you some cost indications there at the end, I've let you see that that really is both viable and cost effective. So that's pretty much, I'm going to wrap it up from there in terms of my talking. Before I take some questions, there's a couple of things I'm just going to point out. The details are there of our new website. We've recently done a new website. We're still adding to it. There's still new case studies and things like that going on all the time. But for those of you who haven't seen it, I would recommend you have a look. There's a lot of useful information on there, lots of different stuff. We've got information about our clients, our deployments, what we've done. As I say, there's some case studies which would be worth a read. But there's a lot of information on there which some of you will find useful about the technology, our business partners that we work with, etc. The other thing that I will say before we go, what we have done is we have actually put in place demo servers, both here from London at our EMEA headquarters and indeed in our US headquarters. So we've put demo servers available there. What we can do for anybody who wants to have a look, basically the way we look at this is seeing is believing. We can give you access to our demo server for a few users, allow you to upload some files so that you can work on your own data. We can make those available to you on that demo platform, and then you can have a go. Now, what I would say is that you will be accessing over the open internet with the vagaries of the internet, which are obviously slightly out of our control. I can assure you on a corporate network we would improve the performance by somewhere between 30 and 60%. So you'll be seeing the worst case scenario. For anybody who is interested, I would recommend you do it because you will be very surprised at the level of performance that you see. It really is very good performance that we can achieve. So I would put that out there for people who do want to explore this further. It's well worth a look. You will be pleasantly surprised at what you can see, and rest assured, you know, that's the worst case scenario. We can massively uplift the level of performance when we're doing this in the controlled environment of a corporate network. So my name's Chris Harvey, as I say, Operations Director, IMSCAD. I am going to open this to any questions, if anyone's got any. We often find we're limited on questions. If anybody has got any, come through to me. I'm going to pop myself on hold for a minute and basically thank you all for your time today. I'll just read the questions as they come in. But thank you everyone for listening today. Please do get in touch. Certainly have a look at the website. Go on there, see what information's on there, and you can register for the demo server on there or come directly to me. I'm going to just put myself on hold for a minute and see if we get any questions coming in. But thank you very much for your time today.